She stood there, mop in hand, with her back straight and eyes steady, refusing to move. The boardroom was full of executives in tailored suits, and yet not one of them could match the stillness, the power of the janitor. The silence was tense. The CEO, late to the meeting, glanced at her with a mix of confusion and irritation. "You're blocking my way," he said sharply. She didn't flinch. She just looked him in the eye and said, "And you're about to make a mistake you'll regret." No one knew her name. No one cared to ask. But that was about to change, because today, a janitor was going to expose what no one in the company dared speak of, and the CEO would never forget it. In this amazing story, you'll witness a janitor who refuses to be silenced, a corporate empire built on secrets, and a confrontation that shakes the company to its core. You'll learn why she stood her ground, what the CEO had hidden, and who this mysterious janitor really was. Pay close attention. There's a brief quiz at the end, asking, how many times was Marilyn Brooks mentioned in this story? It's just for fun. Get it right within 7 days for a chance at our shoutout post. Watching late? Answer anyway. We might still surprise you. Drop a comment, hit like, subscribe now, and turn on the bell for more. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly as the clock in the hallway ticked toward 8:59 a.m. The entire top floor of Harrington Global's headquarters gleamed like a showroom. White marble floors, silver-framed art, and walls that seemed to whisper wealth. And in the middle of it all, pushing her cleaning cart slowly down the corridor, was Marilyn Brooks, the janitor. No one paid her any attention. That's how it had always been. Employees brushed past without eye contact. Executives acted like she didn't exist. But Marilyn was used to being invisible. In fact, she counted on it. That morning, she'd finished scrubbing the executive bathrooms and was polishing the glass entryway to the main boardroom when she heard raised voices inside. A merger deal, controversial and secret, was being finalized. She wasn't supposed to be there. But no one noticed her through the frosted glass. That's when she heard the name, Clear Ridge Technologies, and the word, kickbacks. She froze. That company was responsible for shutting down the tech incubator she'd helped fund years ago, under her real identity. See, what no one at Harrington Global knew was that Marilyn Brooks wasn't always a janitor. Just a few years earlier, she was a venture capitalist, a respected one. She'd vanished from the business world after a personal tragedy and changed everything. Name, look, routine. She didn't want money. She wanted answers. And what she heard that day in the boardroom confirmed her worst fears. Harrington Global had buried competition through shady partnerships, and now they were preparing to do it again. Later that afternoon, as the CEO, Daniel Pierce, prepared for a press conference on the merger, Marilyn stood in the hallway outside the boardroom. She blocked the door with her cart. "Excuse me," Daniel said, looking irritated. "I'm heading in." She didn't move. "I need 10 minutes," she said calmly. His eyes narrowed. "Who are you to demand anything?" She reached into her pocket and held up an old business card. Dusty, creased, but unmistakable. Marilyn Brooks, founding partner, Alderstone Ventures. The color drained from his face. Around them, assistants stopped mid-step. Phones slipped back into pockets. Time froze. Marilyn didn't yell. She simply said, "I know what you're about to do. And if you do it, I'll make sure the right people hear every word from that boardroom today." Daniel tried to call her bluff. But by that evening, she'd already uploaded a whistleblower report. And that same night, journalists were calling. She didn't come to work the next day. She didn't have to. But in the break room, taped to the bulletin board, was a single note. "Never underestimate the quiet ones. Marilyn Brooks." And just like that, the janitor who no one noticed had made the most powerful man in the company stop in his tracks. Daniel Pierce stood in the executive lounge that evening, sipping scotch he barely tasted. Behind the glass walls, the skyline of the city blinked its indifferent lights back at him. The day had been a PR disaster. Stock value had dipped by 2%. The board had called 3 emergency sessions. Reporters were already digging, and all because of her. He stared at the copy of the business card on his desk, scanned, enlarged, printed in color. Marilyn Brooks. He remembered the name vaguely, a headline from 6 years back, a rising star in venture capital. Then nothing, vanished. He ran a hand through his graying hair. A janitor, he muttered under his breath. She played us all. But it wasn't just the exposure that rattled him. It was the calm with which she'd done it. No shouting, no drama, just truth, delivered like a blade to the ribs. The next morning, Marilyn sat quietly in her studio apartment, a tiny walk-up near the river, nothing like the home she used to own in Midtown. A cup of tea sat untouched beside her. The news was already spreading. One anchor had called her the Ghost of Wall Street. She wasn't flattered. She hadn't done it for fame. She did it for coal. A name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. Her son would have been 19 this year. She used to dream of him interning at the very firms she once funded. He loved computers, used to build things from scratch, even before he turned 10. He was quiet, kind, nothing like the men who filled boardrooms with noise and bravado. When Cole died in that startup lab fire, the one Marilyn's fund had unknowingly backed, she'd walked away from everything: the company, the money, her identity. Her only goal became understanding why that lab had failed inspection, why the safety budget had been slashed. And every breadcrumb had led her here, to Harrington Global, and to Daniel Pierce. Daniel, meanwhile, was not sleeping. By noon, he'd already met with legal 3 times. Compliance had begun an internal audit. The whispers were louder now. People were asking questions they shouldn't be. He didn't know what Marilyn had said in that report. Not fully. But the media wasn't stupid. They'd find the pattern. He walked into the boardroom that afternoon and sat at the head of the table. Everyone went silent. "Find her," he said. An assistant blinked. "Marilyn Brooks?" "No," Daniel growled. "Who she talks to? Who helps her? I want names, emails, patterns. I don't care if you have to go through janitorial shift logs or HR archives from 10 years ago. I want everything." He knew the threat wasn't over. It wasn't just about Marilyn exposing him. It was about who else might rise now that someone had dared to challenge the system. Meanwhile, Marilyn visited a tiny tech library tucked behind a laundromat in Brooklyn. The owner, a wiry man named Wes, had once been a mentee of hers. He didn't recognize her at first. "I'm looking for any old internal files from the Cobalt Accelerator," she said. His brows knit. "That's been gone a while." "I know, but you kept backups." He nodded slowly. "You used to... Wait." He squinted at her. "Marilyn?" She gave him a tired smile. Wes's face tightened. "You shouldn't be here. People are watching." "I'm counting on that." He hesitated, then led her behind a curtain. The small back room smelled of dust and soldering iron. Marilyn opened a drawer of USB drives and began searching. There were contracts, funding memos, private memos between Cobalt and Harrington. She froze at one PDF. Budget reallocation, Phase 2. It was a file from 6 years ago. The timestamp matched 2 weeks before the lab explosion that killed her son. In it, someone had signed off on reducing fire suppression funding, redirecting it to executive bonuses and marketing prep. And at the bottom, initials, DP. Her hands trembled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Later that week, Daniel's phone buzzed with an alert from Internal Risk Management. Subject, URGENT, confidential whistleblower documents in circulation. Inside were images of the budget memo, the PDF she had. It wasn't leaked yet, just flagged on an encrypted forum used by ex-Harrington employees. But it was enough. Daniel paced his office. She's trying to destroy me. But what really unsettled him was that she hadn't. She could have dropped the files publicly, but hadn't, which meant she was waiting. For what? The board was fracturing. Some directors believed Daniel should step down until the audit was complete. Others wanted a show of force, a lawsuit against Marilyn for unauthorized access and disruption of corporate operations. But Daniel knew something they didn't. If they went after her, she'd burn them all down. He poured another drink. Then he made a call. Marilyn received the email 2 hours later. Subject: invitation. Private meeting requested. From Daniel Pierce. The message was brief. 1 hour, corner booth, Monarch Cafe, no press, no lawyers, just answers. She stared at the screen. She could ignore it, or she could go. She chose to go. The Monarch Cafe was quiet at that hour. A soft jazz tune played from speakers above. Daniel was already seated, eyes scanning the room nervously. When Marilyn entered, heads didn't turn. She still wore her janitor's coat. She liked the disguise. She sat across from him. Neither spoke. Finally, Daniel leaned forward. "You want money?" She blinked once. "You think I did all this for money?" "Then what? Revenge?" "I want the truth on paper. Signed. Public. He scoffed. "You think I'd do that?" "You already did it," she replied, sliding a printed copy of the budget memo across the table. 6 years ago, before Cole died. Daniel's jaw clenched. He didn't deny it. "I didn't know anyone would be hurt," he said. "You never checked." Silence. He stared at the paper. "You've made your point. You want to crucify me in the press? Go ahead." "I don't care about the press," she said. "I care about the next mother who buries her child because someone moved a decimal." His fingers curled into fists. She stood. As she walked out, she said, "You still have a choice, but not for long." Back in her apartment, Marilyn turned on her old laptop. She looked at the article drafts, the legal affidavits, the PDFs she could post. But something made her hesitate. Daniel hadn't denied it, but he hadn't defended it either. And now the board would see him as weak. And if he fell, someone worse might take his place. Was she stopping a system, or just swapping its mask? 3 days later, Daniel addressed the press. He looked tired, pale, but composed. "We take whistleblower reports seriously," he said, "and we are conducting a full independent review of decisions made during the Cobalt Accelerator funding cycle. Our goal is transparency and accountability. No apology, no admission, just words." But then, he added, "We have invited a former stakeholder to observe and contribute to the process. Ms. Marilyn Brooks will serve as an independent advisor during the review." The room buzzed. Marilyn watched the live stream on her laptop. She didn't smile. She didn't react. But her hands stopped shaking. That night, a single package arrived at Daniel's penthouse, no return label. Inside was an old photo of Cole, wearing a hoodie with the Cobalt logo. And scribbled on the back, in Marilyn's handwriting, "Your decisions have names." Daniel stood alone in his kitchen, the photo trembling in his hand. And for the first time in years, he couldn't finish his drink. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dim glow of the kitchen, the photo still resting on the marble island. Every hour, he reached for his phone to type a response, then stopped. What could he possibly say? "Sorry? I didn't mean to?" Words like that sounded grotesque now, small, worthless. By 4 a.m., he finally moved. Not toward his bed, but to the study. He opened the safe behind the bookshelf, pulled out a folder marked Cole Brooks Incident, a file legal had sealed, and instructed him never to speak of again. He flipped through it slowly. Photos of the burned-out lab, scanned autopsy reports. One line made his breath catch. Cause of death, smoke inhalation, accelerated by non-compliant ventilation systems. He remembered the meeting where those systems were downgraded. He remembered the email chain, and he remembered signing off. Not because he knew a child would die, but because someone said the fire risk was acceptable under the updated code. He closed the folder, but not the guilt. Across the city, Marilyn sat at a bus stop bench as the sky turned from charcoal to soft orange. She didn't want to go home. Home was too quiet. And ever since she'd delivered that photo, something in her had shifted. She hadn't expected a reaction from Daniel. In truth, she didn't know if she wanted one. She just needed him to see it, to see Cole, to understand. But as the sun broke through the skyline, she felt something else rise in her. Fatigue. Deep, unrelenting fatigue. 6 years of silence, 6 years of pretending to be invisible. She had finally made them look, and still, no one had said her son's name out loud. Not once. Later that morning, a new headline began circulating among finance insiders. Whistleblower to join internal review. Genuine shift or strategic optics? Marilyn read it over black coffee in a borrowed office downtown, a temporary space set up by one of her former colleagues from Alderstone Ventures. Word had gotten out that she was back. Now old faces were crawling out of the woodwork. One of them was Elena Cross, a former partner at Alderstone, now a rising star in sustainability tech. Elena entered the room with an elegant coat, a precise smile, and something Marilyn hadn't seen in a long time: genuine regret. "I should have said something after Cole," Elena said without prompting. "You didn't owe me anything." "That's not true." Marilyn looked up. "Then why didn't you?" Elena hesitated. "Because we all knew Harrington was too big to fight. And honestly, we thought you'd come back when you were ready. We didn't think you'd disappear?" Elena nodded. Marilyn sipped her coffee. "I didn't disappear. I buried myself." A pause. "I'm glad you're making them squirm," Elena added. "But be careful. Daniel might not be the one holding all the strings anymore." Marilyn narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" "There's chatter. Someone higher up, a silent partner. The board won't admit it, but funding rounds are being directed by people we never see. Daniel's fading. Fast." That night, Daniel sat in his office going over the next press statement. His assistant knocked, stepped in nervously. "There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." "Send her in." It wasn't Marilyn. It was Corinne Astor, the board chair. Her heels clicked like a metronome as she entered. "You're making this worse." Daniel didn't look up. "You mean trying to fix it?" "No, Daniel. You're trying to manage guilt. That's not the same thing." He finally looked at her. "You knew. About the Cobalt Fund. About the memo." "I knew we had to survive that quarter." "And you let me take the hit." Corinne tilted her head. "You were willing." He stood. "We can fix it now." She smirked. "No, you can retire quietly and let this pass." He walked around the desk. "You want me out?" "I want stability." "And Marilyn?" Corinne's expression turned cold. "She's a symbol, and symbols are dangerous when they start speaking at shareholder meetings." "She's not a symbol," Daniel said quietly. "She's a mother." Corinne gathered her coat. "And you're a liability." The next morning, Marilyn received an anonymous envelope slipped under her apartment door. Inside, a photo of Corinne Astor standing with a man she didn't recognize. On the back, a note. "Your enemy isn't the one who speaks. It's the one who stays silent." No signature. She stared at the handwriting. Clean, almost mechanical. Something was shifting. This wasn't just about Daniel anymore. At Harrington HQ, the internal review had begun. Marilyn sat at the far end of the long glass table, facing a dozen lawyers and analysts. Daniel was absent. The room felt cold, clinical. Even though she had the facts, the files, the photo, something in her gut said she was no longer playing the same game. One of the younger analysts leaned over to whisper, "They're stalling. They want you to give up or settle." She whispered back, "I'm not here for a payout." He looked at her. "Then why are you here?" She didn't answer, because even she wasn't sure anymore. Back at the penthouse, Daniel stood in front of a mirror, adjusting a tie he no longer cared about. He had been invited to a charity gala that evening, an event he had once hosted. This year, the invitation felt like a formality. As he buttoned his cufflinks, his eyes caught something in the reflection. His face looked older, his posture was tired, but more than that, he looked hollow. A man unmade by the weight of choices he thought would never resurface. He reached for the invitation and hesitated, then tore it in half. That night, Marilyn got a call, a blocked number. She answered. Silence. Then a voice, deep, calm, practiced. "You've made yourself a target, Ms. Brooks." Her voice didn't waver. "So send another photo. I'll frame it this time." A pause. "Back away now, and we'll leave your son's name out of what comes next." She froze. That line wasn't casual. It was precise, surgical. They weren't threatening her safety. They were threatening his memory. She spent the rest of the night walking. Blocks turned into miles. Thoughts turned into spirals. She had risked everything to bring truth to light. But now the system wasn't pushing back with denial. It was rewriting history, blurring the facts, threatening to make her son's legacy vanish. And if that happened, what had all of this been for? At sunrise, Marilyn stood outside the Harrington building again, this time not in uniform. She wore the same blazer she once wore on her first pitch at Alderstone Ventures. She looked up at the glass tower. Inside, Daniel was watching her from the 32nd floor, phone in hand, ready to make a call. But he didn't. Because standing next to her, placing a quiet hand on Marilyn's shoulder, was Elena Cross. And Daniel knew then, the past wasn't going away. It was organizing. Sometimes the loudest voices aren't the ones that change the world. It's the ones that refuse to be silenced. Marilyn never asked to be a hero. She just wanted the truth. But when truth costs everything, and the past won't stay buried, some battles can't be settled, only carried. And in that quiet wait, a different kind of strength is born. If this story moved you, comment where you're watching from and answer the quiz at the end. Get it right within 7 days for a chance at our shoutout post. Watching late? Answer anyway. We might still surprise you. And if you love this kind of emotional story, the next one is already waiting for you. Click the video that will show on your screen soon. We'll meet you there. Quiz. How many times was the name Marilyn Brooks mentioned in this story?